Hey, Christine, welcome to the show.
Hey, Brittany. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it is awesome to have you here. It looks like you're in like an art room.
Yeah, this is my home studio, so to speak. So I do a lot of creative things in here.
I love that. I think that innovation and entrepreneurship it's an art, right? Like being able to like see this vision while you're still on a white canvas, you know?
Absolutely. That's exactly what it is. And my background was in art. And so it's a perfect segue into my entrepreneurial endeavors
Oh my
as
God.
I continue to grow. Yeah.
Well, then let's just jump into it. So our first question is always we want to know our guest's background because most people don't, they're not in kindergarten saying I want to pioneer vulvas, right? Like we usually somehow end up here. And so where are you from? What did you study? Did you have a career before this? And then how did you end up here?
Yeah, thanks. I started off in design, uh, my mid 20s, and I went to art school, basically design school in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. I just knew from a young age I wanted to be a designer of some sort, but I didn't know the name of it because when we were teenagers, there was no title of like graphic designer, industrial designer. There was no talk about that stuff. So I just had to kind of figure it out on my own. It turns out I was always of the industrial design kind of like that's how my creativity lended itself. And I always wanted to build things and make things. Went on, did my master's in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada after that, and went very deep down the industrial design, product design rabbit hole. And I just knew I always wanted to make medical devices, which sounds so boring on the outside, but it's such a cool field because there's so many issues and problems and design problems that need to be fixed. And I just feel like it's the perfect place for my crazy creative mind to thrive. I grew up in Newfoundland, Canada, St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada. And that's the most easternly city in Canada. So you're basically out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And I ended up traveling all over the world after, high school. I visited about 23 different countries. I ended up living in Vancouver, Calgary, Montreal, Ottawa, Halifax. I'm now back in Halifax, and our team and my company has just grown and expanded to each coast in Canada. So we haven't entered the States yet, but that's my next goal down the road.
Oh my gosh. Any way that we can help you, let's do that. What is Granville Biomedical?
Yeah, Granville Biomedical is a women's health tech company that myself and my co-founder started. My co-founder is a registered nurse, and her and I met on a medical outreach mission in Bangladesh in 2018. And we were there because we joined a volunteer group that were on their way over there to host a conference all about safer delivery practices in birthing, essentially. And my co-founder was there to help teach some of those courses. I was there to help teach people how to 3D print different types of anatomical models, including vulva models and anything else that might be beneficial to them on the ground in that country. And her and I just started chatting about, there's so much innovation happening in healthcare, but there's so much potential, and especially in that simulation space. So we started designing simulation models that replicate female anatomy, so that healthcare practitioners and students especially can get the hands-on training that's required to feel comfortable, confident, competent in their practice. And in healthcare, women's health has always been, there's been a huge disparity in just research and device design. And I just felt like there was a big gap there that we needed to fill. And so Crystal and I embarked upon what we thought would be a pretty linear path forward. And it's been a wild ride, but that's what we do. So in very simple terms, we make vaginal models for people to train with and teach with.
I have so many questions. I'm so
Yeah.
excited. This is amazing. My first question is, can I have a vaginal model? Because I currently have a 3D printed clit. I have a 3D printed uterus over here on this side. for anyone who's watching this on YouTube. I got that. I
Cool.
got this. I practically bring this everywhere I go because it's like the best. My 3D printed clit. Like I just bring this thing everywhere. It's the best conversation starter. And everyone has so many questions. So I would love a vagina model if that's even like thing that you do, like in terms of sending it to people.
Yeah, we can hook you up with one of those, no problem.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
So when did you go on this retreat and find Crystal? How long ago was that?
So that was about 2.5 years ago.
Okay.
And we started the company shortly after us meeting. Sometimes you just know. I feel like sometimes friends become fast friends, co-founders become co-founders. Everything's when they feel right and things start to flow. It's kind of interesting how things happen fairly quickly when you just let it organically start, moving forward. So her and I met, we were fast friends, we were fast co-founders, and we're still together. It's like she's like my partner in crime here, my partner in vagina making.
I love it. That's how I feel about my co-founder, Dr. Julie Hakeem. We're team vagina,
Nice. Yeah. Awesome.
So what did medical students use before your models in order to learn about vulvas and what they should be doing?
Well, that's the crazy part. And they still, to this day, use things like cow tongues and car washing sponges. So I always joke and say that's going to be the title of my first book, because who the hell is using that in healthcare? Why is that okay? How come no one questions that? And how come other people aren't doing something about that? And so when we did a lot of digging and a lot of research in that, it's, there's a lot of competitors out there who are making comparable products, but they're so expensive that the healthcare institutions and educational med schools, they can't afford to buy them.
Mm-hmm.
So with the rise of 3D printing, we just feel like there's no excuse anymore. We can make pretty much anything, and so can anybody for that matter. So let's just actually, give women the respect they deserve and have realistic vaginal models to train with, as opposed to rehearsing suturing techniques on oranges, cow tongues, car washing sponges. And really that stemmed from, at one point, there was a couple of studies 10 years ago that said, oh, car washing sponges are good enough. This is good enough to rehearse the repair of lacerations that occur during childbirth. And you'll feel fine when you go in to do this in real life, because you'll get that training. And so the medical students that we've dealt with said, oh, hell no. Like, we do not feel prepared, because you go in there and a woman has just given birth, and quite often it's a resident who's doing the suturing. And they said, like, the birthing room is, there's probably 10 people in there, the partner, the doctor, your supervisor, students. And they said the pressure and everything that goes with that is, you can't prepare for that, especially without realistic hands-on training.
There's blood, there's poop, there's literally a baby crying, there's amniotic fluid, there's tears. I can't even, and like, oh my God. And then being under there and being told, like, you practice on a sponge, I'm sure you just get it done. And we know from our previous interviews on this podcast that suture is actually super, super critical to the rest of that woman's life in terms of her incontinence. Pelvic organ prolapse is the number one reason women are put in nursing homes. Comfortable sex.
Sexual function,
I'm totally screwed about having kids. I'm 29 and people ask me, are you going to have kids? And I'm like, dude, honestly, Femtech Focus has screwed me, because I've learned what happens to vaginas. Like, I've learned, and, I like not painful sex. I like not peeing my pants. I like even fecal incontinence is a thing that we don't never talk about, even taboo within Femtech. So anyways, I'm getting on my soapbox, but I'm feeling you. This is super important. So you 3D print this? So when I think of 3D printing, it's like what I held up, right? It's like this hard plastic thing. So that's not what you're printing, right? Can you tell us more about what material you're printing in?
Yeah, so you can 3D print with softer, more pliable materials too. But we just basically make molds and we fill them with silicone, and we make vaginas. We also make penises. One of our first customers, it's funny because we launched the company, we were very female focused. One of our very first customers was a male incontinence company. and said, Christine, can you do male anatomy? And, of course we can do either or. We just chose to stay in the women's lane. And that was one of our first customers. So it just goes to show there's a need for that kind of simulation training for right across the board. And that company was actually just struggling with demonstrating their medical device to the clinicians who would eventually prescribe them. So there's just something to be said about, the simplistic nature of simulation and how needed it is. And the healthcare industry right now is just it's so ready for innovation in every single way. And it's starting to now open up to more people who are creative that want to find solutions for some of that stuff. But yeah, it's just basically, 3D printing molds and making whatever body part you need to with silicone.
Okay, so do you also make different molds that have different types of labias?
Yeah, we do. So we have postpartum and also nulliparous. So a uterus and a vagina that's never given birth, and then one that has given birth. And those are for two different targeted audiences, of course. So we have one model that helps to demonstrate the insertion of a menstrual cup. You wouldn't believe how many women just have no idea how to insert a menstrual cup. And how would we know? Because
how would we know?
It's not intuitive. It's like this big, cup. And when you see that on the shelf in the drugstore, I don't know, people are kind of intimidated to even try. But there's a simple solution. Every doctor's office in the world should have a vaginal model where they teach young girls, here's how you insert a tampon. Here's what a menstrual cup looks like. Here's where that goes. And even, when you go to a doctor and say, hey, I'm interested in contraceptives and specifically maybe IUDs, they usually just sketch you a little diagram on a piece of paper or Google it in their office and show you horrific pictures of an IUD being inserted. But, what if they could just show you in their office? It's not terrifying. Here's the actual IUD. Here's the tube it goes through. Here's the procedure. Here's the model that would simulate your vaginal opening and whatnot. And I just feel like we need more transparency with women's health. It's just so shrouded with mystery. And that makes you feel ashamed of your body, right? From the time you're a young girl, you don't talk about vaginas. I called my vagina a moo-moo until I was 10 years old, maybe older. I'd probably still be calling it that if I didn't learn any different. And it's just like, it's always just so shrouded with mystery. And, Crystal, my co-founder, and I just said, it's just enough. Like, it's just time. Like, let's give up all this bullshit of, pretending females don't have anatomy. Like, let's just bring it to the forefront and put the emphasis on it that it deserves to make this a priority in healthcare as opposed to a footnote in a medical training module. And that's what we really intended to do from the get-go.
Are you able to also simulate the uniqueness of a vagina in terms of its pressure and because I'm asking this, let me give you some context. I consult a lot of our Femtech founders, and a lot of them want to put something in a vagina, whether it's a mid device, a new kind of tampon, a new whateverness, right? And they're looking for a model to test it out in because turns out vaginas are not just like this big open cylinder. They're actually like folded over, and there's like pressure, and there's liquids, and there's movement, and all these things. And so are we able, is the technology advanced enough to like kind of incorporate those other features?
Yeah, I can't see why not. I mean, we don't currently do that, but the texture and pliability of silicone is so close to human tissue. It is very close. So there's definitely ways you can do it. We do use different textures of silicone for, say, the muscle or various parts of the female anatomy that would be a little, a bit more dense, let's just say. So there's ways to do that. And I'm sure we could just push the envelope a little harder and actually figure that out. It's a whole new world, like I said, with 3D printing and the availability and knowledge that everybody has now to create some of this stuff. So absolutely, it's actually a great idea. Maybe we should make that as our next one.
I'm just brainstorming with you. I do this a lot on our episodes and our interviews. My listeners know this, that I'm always like, what about this? And founders are like, please excuse me. I need to jot that down. I'm gonna go like, can we end this early? Actually.
Yeah.
But it's because I see this need, right? There's all these femtech founders that are like, how do I test this thing out? Like I put it in my vagina, put it in my friends' vaginas, but like we need an actual model, right? And so
Yeah.
this is a huge need. Anyways, you and I should talk more about that. Um, uh, what are other, so med school, right, for practicing on this, demonstrations, what are some other reasons that we would need vagina models?
Yeah, so when we started, we thought our main priority and our main target audience would be medical schools.
Mhm.
Turns out it's totally not.
What?
It's private practitioners. So the suturing seems to be like definitely a needed type of model for them to train within medical schools. Great, and we would love to supply them with those indefinitely. But our main customers have come from private industry, pelvic floor physiotherapists.
Uh,
And it's also an area that women don't even know much about. Like you don't even know, when would I go see one of those? What do they do? And so pelvic floor physiotherapy seems to be on the rise in Canada for sure. And I'm sure the States is very similar. And what they do is they teach their clients, their patients about different techniques to strengthen the pelvic floor. If they're having sexual dysfunction, sexual pain, they teach them about dilators to help dilate your vaginal opening. And I mean, I don't know enough about pelvic floor physiotherapy to describe things and do it justice, but it's just amazing how they can actually still, during the pandemic, they've been using our models, a lot of our customers, to teach and train their patients on Zoom. So they hold up the
Virtually,
model.
yeah.
Yeah. So I love that. And I feel like that's the future. That's the future, just retaining patients and gaining new ones during a pandemic or otherwise. And all that online training is the future now. So I think there's some huge potential here.
Absolutely. And I wonder, you may or may not know the answer to this, but I wonder, the pelvic floor therapists, like, how are they training? Are they training on cow tongues too? Like, or is it like it's all theoretical and it's actually a real woman who it's their patient? It's the first time they're actually doing it, because I didn't know what pelvic floor therapy was. I thought it was someone coaching you through Kegels, but turns out it's actually like they insert their fingers and they like move, they massage. And I'm like, that's super invasive. Oh my God. I would want the person having to have done that many a times before they do it to me,
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how they train in their schooling for that. Quite often in med school, I know they use what's called standardized patients. So it's real people who volunteer and they're paid to go in and let the medical students train on them.
Okay.
So I don't think anything like suturing, like nothing of that kind of invasive nature, but like physical exams, touching, feeling, any sort of palpation of their body or their skin and conditions, female health conditions, I'm sure are similar. But that's a good question. I'm going to look into that and find out how they train, because they have to start somewhere, right?
Where's the vagina they start with, Totally.
Yeah. So
As I've heard that like the uterus can actually be tilted like one way or the other. So do you make models that are like that specific, like they're all different, or you have a standard one? Or I know you said pre and post birth, but otherwise.
we usually stay somewhere in the mid-range of what would be, the average of different body parts. So tilted uteruses, it's funny because I've heard that term quite a few times, but if you look at the female anatomy, every uterus is tilted. So every uterus is kind of like, if you go up through the vaginal canal, it is kind of tilted back. So I think that's fairly normal. But this is an answer that most women should know, but we don't know because it's so mysterious. I feel like it's easier to find out stuff about the Egyptian pyramids than it is about our own vaginas. Right? Like
I'm laughing.
Tilted.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I can remember like I was early 20s and I had an OB-GYN in my annual saying, oh, your uterus is a little tilted. And I don't know why, but I've like, oh, I have a tilted uterus. Like
I've been
and I
told
don't
that
even know what
too.
that means.
I've been told that too. And I went home and I cried. That was like 5 years ago. My OB-GYN said the same thing to me. Oh, look at that. You have a tilted uterus. And I was like, should I be concerned? She goes, no, lots of women have it.
Yep.
And then I saw a different OB-GYN not too long after that. And she said, I don't know why the doctor said that to you. She said, pretty much every woman's uterus is tilted. Like what?
God.
It's
All
almost like
right.
they just get in a habit of saying that and then give women a complex, like, oh, there's something wrong with me. As if we need another reason to think something is wrong with me between periods and pain. And you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
we don't need another reason to be paranoid about our vaginas and uteruses.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one time I had a guy go down on me and he said, "Oh, you have a very small clitoris." And I remember being like, "Tell me more about me," because it was
What?
like, I don't even know like what's average. Like
Wait, what made him an expert?
I guess he had experienced enough clitoral stimulation that he had some as a general knowledge of different ones, which is fine.
Wow.
Yeah. But I really was like, but tell me more about me, because all I have in reference is like medical things, like, like very tech and anatomical diagrams or porn. And so like,
Right.
I don't even know, like, what am I average? Like, where am I on the scale? So like also the tilted uterus thing is like, is that normal? Like, does everyone have that? Right. So we really do need your models. In fact, I would love for there just to be a giant vaginal model, like everywhere, just everywhere. I was saying we should go ahead.
They should be in doctors' offices for sure.
For sure.
They should be normalizing the aesthetics of a vagina and a vulva and just everything to do with female anatomy. But instead, it's like shamed. Like, you don't talk about it. You don't look at pictures of that, especially not when the vulva are spread. You don't want to ever, you know what I mean? Like, you always want to, the pictures you see in textbooks are always everything is closed, the labia is closed. And so you never really get a real, full frontal of like, here's what it looks like if it's spread open. And that's probably why you're like, is my clitoris too small? Is it too big? Is it, what's wrong with me? But that is not even a question we should be asking ourselves. I'll tell you why. I bet, well, penis size might be different for men, but I don't think men analyze their own bodies the way that we do. They're not as hard on themselves as we are, because we analyze everything from our breasts to our, our labia, to our clitorises, to our anuses. And is this normal? Is this okay? Is it pretty? Is it ugly? Is it this? Is it that? And it's just unfortunate that that is how we are raised. But we're working on fixing that. We're working on that stigma.
You know how little boys always draw circumcised penises everywhere? Like, that's just what they do. They doodle penises and they're always circumcised, which, by the way, uncircumcised, like, I have a whole theory that's genital mutilation, but whatever, we'll put a pin in that for now. But I feel like that normalizes it for guys. Like, oh, that's what our stuff looks like, like, but if girls could draw vulvas, if we were allowed to doodle on our desks in school and draw vulvas, we may be a little bit more comfortable. Like, oh yeah, those what that looks like,
Right. Totally. I agree 100%.
Are your 3D your models, are they like have skin tone to it?
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, a lot of the competitors out there, they have one skin color and it's orange. It's basically peach.
Okay.
And so like when Crystal
like
and I were in
suntan.
Yeah, and the companies that make the pigment, they call that flesh tone. And I'm like, whose flesh tone is that? Like, I don't even, if you're orange, I would suggest you go see a doctor right away. But no, the pigment is called flesh tone. And I decided when we started the company that we were going to make custom skin tones, because when we were in Bangladesh, the women said to us, like, how come the vaginas are orange? And I was like, good question. We're going to look into that. And so we started like playing around and making different custom colors. Someone said to me, well, Christine, why don't you make one your skin tone? Because I'm kind of like an olive, I'm kind of a dark Caucasian tone. And I was like, good call. So we started there. We started making this kind of olive colored. Then we started making darker African skin tones, because we started selling products into, they were going into West Africa, like Sierra Leone.
Okay.
And speaking of mutilation, they deal with female genital mutilation there. It's predominantly the highest rate of female genital mutilation in the world in Sierra Leone and West Africa. It was built very deep into their culture. And so there's an outreach organization called the Freedom Tree that goes there 2-3 times a year and educates the local villagers on the dangers of that procedure. and why it should really be eradicated from the culture, because there's no health benefits. In fact, quite the opposite. There's a lot of infections, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of danger. I mean, a lot of these procedures are performed with, I would not describe them as medically sanitized or sterile knives or razors or tools. And so we also wanted to see that eradicated. So we created a suite of models that reflect the 4 kinds of female genital mutilation. And we wanted to have those in West Africa to help with that educational piece, which was very interesting to see the videos and the photos come back of the villagers looking at these models. So yeah, to speak to the skin tone question, it was very important for us to, culturally make sure it's appropriate when people are learning from a certain model, that it looks like them. And, I get it, because the women in Bangladesh at that conference, of course, this was, I would almost say, offensive, the fact that we brought a bunch of orange models, and it doesn't even reflect Caucasian skin tones at all either. So we fixed that. When we started our own company, we fixed that. That was one of our first priorities. Like, let's make these appropriate. Let's make people feel more comfortable with learning, because it resembles their own body, as opposed to something in a textbook or something that's orange.
Yeah. Do you ever add pubic hair to it?
No, we don't. And we've been asked that question a few times, and we've racked our brains, like, how can we add hair to these models? Maybe down the road. But for now, they're just bald, essentially. But that gives you also a clearer picture of all the anatomy and the aesthetics. But it would be interesting if we could figure out a way to add hair to them. But then how much hair?
Oh, and curly, straight, red, black, like all of
You're right.
kinds as well, right? Yeah. I wish I could get a chia pet where I could just pour water on.
Yeah.
Think about, this is what I want for Christmas, Mom. I want a vaginal chia pet.
There's someone out there that could make that. You know that, right? There's definitely someone that could make that for you. I'm certain.
Oh my gosh. Well, what are some of your future goals for Granville?
So our future goals, well, we're kind of actively pursuing them right now. So when we started the company, it was really a women's health educational company, simulation company. And I wanted to evolve it into a medical device company. Like, I don't want to just demonstrate devices on these models. I want to actually be innovating the devices that are options for us to have in our bodies, or to work with our bodies, or whatever. So last year when COVID struck, there was a call in Canada from the government, who has the ability, talent, skills, or whatnot to create, PPE, swabs, anything of that nature to help the Canadian government and the healthcare system. And we put our hand up and said, oh, well, we have a biocompatible printer. We can make nasal swabs. So we had to go through the regulatory pathway through Health Canada, which is the governing body in Canada, to go through all of their very stringent validation studies. And we created a nasal swab for COVID testing. And so ironically, what kind of appears to be a bit of a divergence from our main core business is not at all, because in our mind, we were like, well, we've always wanted to design pelvic swabs, and a very novel, effective pelvic swab for women's health. The government's asking if we can make a nasal swab for COVID. Well, why don't we do that and push it as far as we can, and then leverage a lot of our research and development to create that novel pelvic swab that we've always been talking about making.
Oh, yes.
So
that's
now
seizing opportunity. I love it.
Right. So now we got pussies and swabs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we have a nasal swab that's going through the healthcare system in Canada, and we're going to market right now with the COVID swabs. And in the background, we are designing this really amazing pelvic exam swab that we would love to see implemented through a clinical trial, and eventually go to market in the next 3 to 5 years. So this stuff takes time. Medical devices take a very long time to get to market, but I mean, what a beautiful way to circle back to women's health and make sure the core business is taken care of. We can always sell and produce our vaginal vulva models. But now it's just a perfect segue into medical devices. And who knows, maybe we start doing IUDs. Maybe eventually down the road, we start doing menstrual cups, or who knows what else we could end up doing. But it's just a really cool to see us activate those ideas and now evolve into that vision that we had. So I just want to keep going with the medical device space for the future.
I love
Yeah.
it. And what are pelvic swabs already in existence, and they just suck? Or what's the innovative need that why do we need these swabs?
Yeah, so with swabs and pelvic exams, quite often they'll do 2 sample collections, right? So there's a bit of a spatula tool, and there's also a swab of sorts. So they do them both separately. And we just feel like, why are we invasively being swabbed twice? Or this, here's the other thing most people don't know. I'm gonna tell you something. This is a secret between me and you. I hope no one's listening. So there's a swab that they use in women's health, and it's called a cyto brush. Okay. It's a non-sterile brush that looks like a mascara wand, but much longer.
I've seen that.
There's a metal tip on the end of it. And quite often after they do it, well, right before they do it, they say, now this might make you bleed a little bit. You might see some spotting after. And so I got my hands on some cyto brushes as we started moving through this design process. And I went, holy crap, these things are like a weapon, non-sterile. You're telling me it's going to puncture my cervix, chances are, or the cervix opening to some extent, and cause a laceration that's going to make me bleed. And no one questions that?
No
one questions that? Like, can you imagine if they were putting a mascara wand with a metal tip up a man's penis? I'm pretty sure that never would have come into existence to begin with, let alone swab a penis with it and say, this might make your balls bleed. Don't worry about it though. Your testicles will be fine. Like, I just don't think that would have been approved ever in history. Yeah. So I get it. It was designed with a purpose in mind. But tell you what, I think now is the time to create some new products with a bigger and better purpose in mind. And the bigger, better purpose is women's health and our dignity, and also our safety. I don't like the idea of something making me bleed during an exam, and then potential for infection and so many other things. So can we please agree that it's time for all of this stuff to be innovated and changed and updated and designed by women who know what it's like to have all these exams and procedures done to them, very invasive and oftentimes very painful. But yeah, we've created a swab that basically reduces any sort of pain and creates a single specimen collection as opposed to multiple. And I think that's the goal here, is
I love
patient safety and simplicity. Let's only get one tool inserted instead of 2 or 3. And let's just make the future of women's health more patient focused, focused on the woman. Yeah.
What I hear you saying is what I hear all day long in Femtech is our baseline for like what's acceptable for women is that pain is acceptable. You just have to deal with it. Having blood come out of you, whether you want it or not, that's acceptable. Being uncomfortable with your legs up in stirrups, well, that's just part of the deal. And so what I hear you saying is like, even down to the freaking swab, we have said, well, it's good enough because, pain, well, women in pain, like they're always going to feel pain, women in blood, whatever. Right. And what we need to do in Femtech is say, no, it's 2021. We can create, we have rockets landing back down on Earth on boats. We can make a swab that isn't a razor that's going to cut you on the inside and make you bleed and feel really uncomfortable while you're naked under a napkin in a brightly lit room, and it's so cold and it smells like sterile, and they're just like, all right, just deal with it. Oh my God.
Yeah. Well, women have a higher threshold for pain, so it's okay. There's just so many excuses that have been made for why things are okay. Like whether it's the healthcare training where they're using cow tongues and car washing sponges. Oh, that's good enough. Or it's a swab that's going to cut us and make our cervical opening bleed. That's okay. That's just what they've always used. Why question it now is what basically you're telling people. And so I'm questioning it. And, people are going to be upset because I've had people say to me, like, who the hell do you think you are? How are you qualified? You're a product designer. You're not a healthcare practitioner. And I say to people, newsflash, you're a healthcare practitioner because you're helping people in the front lines. You don't have time or the skills to be designing stuff in the background. That's what I'm here for.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm here for. So like, tell me your problems, we'll find the solutions kind of attitude, you know? And so I don't think any longer we should be looking at anybody and saying you're unqualified, because if someone is creative and identifying problems and finding solutions for that, that should be celebrated and valued. And, you know, if everyone's intentions are good, and mine certainly are, then, you know, this is a collective effort, and it's going to take a village to change women's health, and even, you know, even more people to change it for the long run internationally. So let's collect as many humans as we can along the way and make this a movement as opposed to a project. And then we're getting somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Well, Christine, if anyone questions you, you send them to me. I'll let them know. All right. I'll let them know what you're working on is really freaking important, and you're super qualified, because most people who've made stuff for vaginas didn't have one. And so we already have some qualifications that they didn't qualify for. And yes, a movement. That's what I hope Femtech Focus is. You know, we're rallying the troops. We have thousands of listeners all over the world. And, you know, it's getting, I'm really excited. At least half of our listeners are actually undergrad and graduate students interested in Femtech.
Cool.
So I'm like, and we have lots of men too, which I'm excited about, because
Cool, yeah.
We're not anti men at Femtech Focus. We're pro men, but pro you know what the hell you're talking about. And like, don't mansplain my vagina to me.
Right,
You know,
right,
the
right.
men in our community are fantastic. Well, Christine,
Yes.
this has been so amazing. I have two last questions for you that our listeners love. The first one is, if someone wanted to start a femtech company, again, all those aspiring femtech founders we have listening, what is an area in women's health and wellness that you think still needs innovating?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would probably say contraceptives.
Tell me
So
more.
like what's our options? To take a pill that alters our hormones and make us feel crazy because it makes us feel mentally unstable. That is not a good option. Or get an IUD that's extremely invasive, and no one even tells you how invasive it is until you're lying on your back with a tube inserted through your cervix, and a device is getting drove up inside you that may or may not stay in place or cause bleeding for 6 months. Or like, I just think these are all such crazy things that are our options. And I just think the whole entire thing needs to be overhauled. But contraceptives, for sure, I feel like there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And there's got to be something that a man can take to take that onus off us.
Yes.
Like, can we get a break for a minute over here? Like, we already carry the children, bleed once a month. Can all y'all take the freaking contraceptives aside from condoms?
Yeah.
And, you know, and do something to help us? So there's got to be a way.
There in my grad school, there was very beautiful Black man, Darius. I still have a crush on you if you're listening. I doubt he is, but if so, he was in a lab. This is probably why I had a crush on him, because he worked in a lab trying to find male contraception. And I was like, oh my God, a man after my heart. And wow. I can remember he had, you know, in grad school, you have a pre-qualifying exam where you're proposing your graduate research. And he had this Venn diagram, and one was like female contraceptions. And it was like all of these brands, all of these things. And on the man side, it just said condom. And in the middle of the Venn diagram, it said withdrawal. And I said, what's that? And he was like, pulling out. I was like, oh, okay. But like, that was it. Like, that was it. Right. And they're just like, is not research that a man could take a pill every day or a shot once a month or whatever to make their sperm, whatever, you know, incompatible, not working, can't swim, whatever. So yeah, contraception, totally there with you.
My other thought, I was just going to quickly interject this one, is I encourage everyone to look up the history of the speculum. The speculum that everyone has used on them, that's the tool that basically expands your vaginal canal so they can perform a pelvic exam or an STI test or any of the above, was designed by a doctor in the 1800s. I believe it was 1867. I believe he was from Missouri, something like this. Don't quote me. The facts are
I'll fact
eluding my
check
brain
it.
right now. Yeah, fact check it. Dr. Marion Sims, and he used to use 2 metal spoons on slave women, and if it didn't hurt them too badly, then he would do it on his Caucasian patients. And he self-proclaimed to hate female anatomy. He thought it was disgusting. And so the statue, he was considered the godfather of gynecology. There was a statue of him in New York City. They tore it down a few years ago
Oh,
because
thank God.
because this story came to light, that the man that designed the tool that's going to crank open our vaginas like a car getting its tire changed actually designed it without any care or consideration for the woman. And still to this day, it is a feeling that I don't think anybody enjoys, and I think everyone dreads. And so can we all agree that we need to change the speculum ASAP, and let's just innovate the crap out of that and make it something that's actually not terrifying. And so our team's been working on that for the past year and a bit. But we've got so many irons in the fire. We need more people innovating. We need more people and more ideas, more collaborative design happening internationally. And if anyone's listening and they want to help us or they want to join forces, absolutely, let's do that, because it's going to take a lot of people to start changing some of this stuff.
Oh my gosh, I love it. And our last question is, what do you think the femtech industry as a whole needs the most right now in order to be successful?
More women founders, more female and diverse founders. Doesn't have to be, it could be female identifying, it could be transgender, whatever, but we need more women approaching female health problems, because who knows better, right, than us. And it's kind of like someone who's designing glasses, and you need to have a vision problem so you can design better glasses. So if you have 20/20 vision, then why are you designing glasses? Like, you don't have firsthand experience doing that. So I think we just need more diversity as founders to start companies, take chances, no more tiptoeing into healthcare. Like, I'm not sure if I'm qualified. Creativity right now is welcomed and encouraged in healthcare. Everyone's ideas are valid, and that's the only path forward, is to be creative collectively and to start finding things that are fundamentally wrong with the healthcare system that we've all been overlooking for decades, right? Because a speculum is something that everyone has used on them, but no one ever says, well, can we do something about it? It's such a basic thing, right? It's not the next iPhone. It's not the next Tesla. It's like,
we're talking about swabs.
Yeah.
Swabs,
Yeah, so it's like, let's innovate swabs, let's innovate speculums, let's innovate all the things that touch our bodies, so that the future generations, maybe one day they'll go in for a pelvic exam and be like, I really enjoyed it. Like maybe one day it'll be such a different experience for people, but we got to start that now.
Yes. Well, Christine, this has been amazing. I cannot wait to get a vaginal model. I'm going to show everyone all the time. I'm
going to ship one to you. But yeah, our websites are granvillebiomedical.ca, and the new Granville Swab website is granvilleswab.ca. So you could check us out there. And Brittany, I'll get your address. You'll get a pussy in the mail.
Pussy in the mail. Love it.